What's up everybody, Thomas Brennan here. Welcome to another School of Sim Racing video. Now today we're going to be taking a look at the Dirt Midgets. Now we're at Lima Land. This is where they were racing at this week. And the setup I'm going to be showing you, understand it's basically a starting point for just about every track that I go to. So this base setup is actually the setup that I had learned when I was actually wrenching on USAC Midgets when we were traveling all over. This was one of the setups that we would try on most of the tracks. It was pretty straightforward. There was a couple of things that we would change, primarily like just the spring rates and the bars, but overall it's pretty much the same. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the iRacing setup. Now, iRacing setup for Lima Land is actually not bad. There's a couple of things that I don't really like, but for the most part, they do the same thing every time. Basically, they've got an easy up shock on the right front, a tie down on the left front, easy up on the right rear, and a tie down on the left rear. That's what they do. I mean, this is basically what they do. They've got the front end jacked all the way up, and then they've got 800 bars in the back, and ride heights, half a turn in the right rear with some wheel spacing. I mean, that's it. And this setup, it's not bad, but it's not great. Okay, if we go take just run a couple of laps here with it. Whoops, got to go through the cone. This is one thing that you're going to notice with a lot of their setups is the bounce in the front end. The front ends on the iRacing setups are usually really light. Ooh. I gotta be honest with you, I've been driving so many other cars lately, I haven't had a chance to really drive these midgets very much, and so it might give me a lap or two to get used to this thing. But as you can see, the front end, it's a lot of bounce in it, and this is a 10% track, so it's not like we're on a rough track right now. But a lot of bounce in the front end, which I really don't like. These cars, they're so light and powerful. You've got to have the steering, touching the ground. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless, because these cars, to drive them good, you got to really get them into the corner. So, as you can see, it's not a bad setup. I mean, I can turn some decent laps here. We can go through the middle, on the bottom, on the top, and whatnot. And it's okay. It's an okay setup. All right. But you'll notice. I mean, notice that front end. I mean, that is a big problem for a lot of people. When you're trying to save or correct, yourself, and that front end's bouncing like that. Understand, that's a recipe for disaster, because if you can't get the car turned, or if you experience, bump steering where you've got the wheels cranked to the left but the thing's in the air, then you've got a real problem, right? So, let's head over, bring up my setup. So first thing, I use different air pressures. I have 12 in the right front, 10 in the right rear, 10 in the left front, 8 in the left rear. Keep in mind, you can download this setup. It's right down below in the description, okay? So you can just download it and upload it into the iRacing. Next, I get rid of the steering offset. I hate that in these cars. I don't like steering offset. I think it sucks, okay? So that's just me. That's more of a personal preference. It doesn't actually affect the handling, but I get rid of it. Next, we've got different springs in the front. So I run 175 in the right front, 165 in the left front. Okay. I've got my shock collar on the left front at 4 inches, and I've got the shock collar on the right front at 3.25. This is basically how I adjust my cross weight. All right, is with the shock collar. Okay. So I've got it down 3.25 because I've got it 48% cross weight. the more crossweight that you have in these cars, right, the more you're going to feel it. It makes a big, big difference in these cars. Next, we've got 775 bars in the left rear and the right rear. I never go below 775. I never go above 8 1/4. Okay, there really is no reason to do that. All right. Next thing, our ride heights. I like to be somewhere around 13 on the right rear and, 10 3/4 to 11 on the left rear. That will change occasionally, but for the most part, I try to stay right around there. Okay, if we look at the shocks, I've got a 3-4 on the left front, a 4-3 on the right front, a 4-7 on the left rear, and then a straight 5 on the right rear. And then 18 inches of wheel spacing on the right rear, and then I've got the left rear all the way in. Okay, so this is my base setup. I will use this setup literally at just about every track that we go to. On the bigger tracks, I will stiffen up the rear bars, and I will stiffen up the front springs. Okay? That's pretty much it. Now, I've been asked by quite a few people, which is, understandable, people asking me, Tommy, how do you come up with your setups? And so I'm going to actually do a video that shows you how I do this, how I come up with these setups, because people are like, how did you figure all this stuff out? And as much as I would love to just say, look, I'm a mad scientist and I just came up with all of it out of the blue, that's not the case. Yes, I worked in racing, as a mechanic crew chief for years and learned a lot of this stuff. I went to Jimmy Sill's School of Racing and stuff. That was back when I was in high school, but I learned a lot of this. A lot of this is real world experience. But not all of the stuff that we do in this game is what we would do in real life. And so I had to find other sources online to kind of give me an idea of which direction do I need to go, because this doesn't seem to work the way that I think it should. And so I would use, like OSR Racing, because they have a lot of setups on there. I would also use iRacing setups and see, how is it what do they have set up on here that for this type of setup. And then I would start working from there. I've also found, setup sheets to help, right? You go to like XXX chassis or Maxim, stuff like that, and they'll give you baseline setups. So I've done a lot, gathered a lot of information. And that's how, and then basically found stuff, right? Found a base setup, started using it, and then started making tweaks, right? Using my setup matrix or adjustment matrix. So that's how I came up with this. Now I'll get more into that process later, but that's what I do. Now, on the rear end, for this track, iRacing uses 675. I'm going to go 662. I will actually drop this down. I'll go to a taller gear as the track slicks off. One thing that you really don't want is you don't want this car spinning its wheels on a slick track and then hitting traction, because that is a recipe for a wheel stand, which is a recipe for a wreck. Okay? Now you're going to notice with this setup, the car is going to be a lot more stable. Okay? And that is me using the brake. Don't be afraid to use the brakes with these cars. Alright? And don't be afraid to just use some good old throttle control, alright? There's nothing wrong with, easing out of the gas. Yeah, I can hold this thing wide open and pitch it into the corner and never lift, but that does not guarantee a fast lap time, okay? All that guarantees is that I'm going around with the throttle wide open. One thing that you want to make sure that you're doing with these cars is by the apex of the corner, you want to make sure that you're pointing down the backstretch, right? So right there, make sure that you're pointing down the next straightaway, because if you're still kind of pointing off towards the wall, you're going to come off towards that wall, and what's going to happen is you're going to veer up to it, because these cars run so much crossweight. Even when you're at the minimum amount, the left side weight is still a lot. And that left side weight is going to make you want to veer to the right. If you've ever noticed when you get ready to go for the pace laps, you hit the gas and these cars do what? They jerk, right? They jerk to the right. And so you want to make sure that you got this car pointed down that straightaway by the apex, pointing down. And that's a problem that a lot of drivers have when they run these cars around the top. What happens is they drive it in straighter like they're driving a sprint car, and then what happens is they're going to come off and they end up tagging the wall. You have to really get the car in there, use the throttle to turn it, and then try to already be coming off straight. Now this can be hard to do with these cars. You know, these cars, anything that you're pitching in like this, it can be hard to hit the groove, whoops, and know that you're hitting it because you're kind of backing it into the corner. So knowing where you're at can be difficult because sometimes you just don't know, right? Because you're backing those wheels in there. It can feel like you're nowhere near the cushion, and meanwhile you actually got your wheels on it. And then there's other times it can feel like that you're, you know, hitting the perfect line, and then you do something like that, right? So rule number one with these cars, make sure that when you get this thing set, that you're pointing down that straightaway, whether you're on the top or the bottom. Also, don't be afraid to use the brakes. The brake is a great tool on these cars, especially if you're not getting the car set right. What you can do is you can tap that brake and it'll actually turn you. That's what I did right there. I just tapped the brake right there and it turned me around, right? So the brake can actually do a good job of helping you get these cars set. And especially if you have problems trying to run the bottom, getting the car to get down there and stay down there. It's one of the things I notice a lot of drivers have problems with is holding their line. Alright, and you want to keep that in mind of other drivers too, because this will happen to me when I'm running the bottom a lot of times. This has happened to me a few times where I come down here and I'm like right here on the bottom, and what happens is I get somebody who goes dive bombing in and then they go slamming into the back of me. So always just keep in mind, there's many ways to run these cars. That's one of the reasons why I love them so much, because they're so much fun in so many different ways that you can drive them and be successful. But as you can see, we've been I'm just messing around here, and we've been turning consistent, steady laps. The front end's not bouncing all around, right? And if I wanted to really put the hammer, really put the hammer down here, let's see what we can do. I've just been kind of cruising. I mean, I'm basically just burping the throttle to get it into the corner. And this thing's just sticking right to the track. Right? You can see, I mean, I'm shaving off 1/10 of a second. I mean, this setup will run, and it'll run good. Now, real quick, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this setup. All right. And we're going to go to a different track. Okay, so we're going to take the exact same setup that we just had on Limaland, and we're going to run it on Knoxville now. So real quick, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Knoxville because I want to see what gear they have. 537. Okay. So now we're going to go right to the Limaland base, and we're going to put in a 537 gear. I'm not going to touch anything else. Now I'm doing this just to show you that this setup will work on everything. Okay. Normally, yes, I would stiffen up the rear bars some. Probably move the right rear in a little bit. Maybe move the left rear in a little bit. Change the front springs. But if you are concerned about that, you don't have to be, because I'm going to show you right now that this setup, even with the stagger, will work. And I'm holding this thing wide open, and we're just planted right to the track right now. Whoa, maybe a little too planted. Huh. As you can see, I mean, we're nice and straight. Keep in mind, I've got 5 inches of stagger in this car. You don't see it getting all crazy, sideways, out of whack. The car is basically driving around itself. I'm literally holding it wide open and just steering it. Now, we are on a 10% track, okay? Or 15, I think, is 10 or 15. So, yes, the track is still tacky and heavy. But my point is you still have a good starting point to work from. We're on a flat half-mile track. This is a setup from a quarter-mile high-banked track. And now we're basically running a horse arena, right, a horse track, and we're turning good laps with it. So as you can see, this setup will work in multiple situations. And just to show you, right, let's bring up the iRacing Knoxville setup. All right, they got 2.5 inches of stagger. They got much stiffer springs, right? Their weight's way different. Now, just to be fair, I will put the fuel down, right? So we have a fair test here. Let's see how this one does. Whoa. I forgot to take out the steering offset. Forgive me for that. I got to get used to my wheel being offset a little bit. Got to turn that off. This thing is wanting to shoot straight to the wall. It's not nearly as stable. It's got this shimmy going down the straightaway. That's probably because God dang it. That's probably because the suspension's so high. They've got it jacked all the way up. Come on, stay with me. Trying to do a fair test here. iRacing setup. Alright. So you can see, we're within a tenth. It's not far off. But the setup that I showed you, right? That's a setup like that was used on a quarter-mile track. Right? This iRacing setup is designed specifically for Knoxville. So, if we look at the fastest lap, which was our first lap, you can see that thing we're basically going straight. It almost looks like a wing sprint car going around there. Alright, so it's a very good setup, and it's a good starting point for basically any track that you're at. It really is. So, that's going to do it, you guys, for this video. Now, really quick, do me a favor. If you like this, please hit that like button. You guys, the response has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, all the comments and the subscriptions and the likes and the share. I mean, it really has been, you guys. I cannot tell you how much that means to me for you guys to do that. Which, I mean, it just shows me how much this stuff is actually helping you, how much you appreciate. So that is just absolutely awesome, man. So just please keep it coming, because that's what fuels me to keep doing this stuff. So hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe, and then share this. Share this with other drivers right in the iRacing community. I know there are a ton of them out there that still need help with this stuff. So share it with them. Do all that for me, and then I will do all that for me, and then I will be back with another video, okay? And until then, as always, I want to wish you good luck, good racing, and take care.